Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the 76ers for 97.3 ESPN.com. He'll be there tonight. I know Elton Brand is speaking at 7:15. That might be, Michael, the most that you can get out of this game tonight is something out of Elton Brand, right?
Yeah, something out of Elton Brand, or hopefully some nice action from Boban. That's really all you can really look forward to in this one, I think, Mike.
Well, Boban is the guy you're looking forward to most tonight?
I think so. I mean, hopefully he'll get a little bit of extended run. I mean, Zaire, obviously, I'd like to see some more from him. He was, my one takeaway from the game last night was I thought he played, pretty well for what you would expect. But, yeah, otherwise there's not too much to appreciate, I guess, if you will.
No. So the last, 2 weeks or so here, I guess you can go back to that Hawks game, then the Magic game. Then they had a little 2-game win streak. And then since then, they have really not played well against the Mavs, the Hawks, the Bucks, the Heat. They beat the Bulls in there. But what is your takeaway going back to the Hawks game to where they are? Since they really beat Boston, it has been ugly.
Yeah, it has been ugly, Mike, but I do think part of it was planning ahead, obviously, in terms of giving some of these guys nights off. Jimmy had a couple nights off. Obviously, Joel had a couple nights off in there. I think once they, after that Boston win, which obviously I think was pretty important just for, morale and team purposes, I think they realized that where they were, they had the third spot, pretty well locked up at that point. And not that they necessarily coasted, but I think they kind of, hit a mental switch to go from, regular season mode to their, they felt like they didn't necessarily have much to prove, which I'm not saying is the right approach, but that's just kind of how it seemed. And now, they're ready to turn that page and go on into the postseason with the guys, with a little bit of rest under their belt and pretty healthy for this point in the season.
Some people have called or tweeted or texted and asked, did the Sixers want the 4 seed?
I don't think so, Mike. I think in that locker room, I think they wanted to, to get the highest seed that they possibly could, which was pretty clear. It was the 3 seed, midway through the season once the Bucks and the Raptors kind of pulled away. On paper, technically, you could probably make an argument that the 3 seed or the 4 seed might have been an easier route to the conference finals for the Sixers. But at the end of the day, if they're going to get there, they're going to have to go through, 2 out of these top 4 teams in the East regardless. I think they know that. I think they think that if they're going to get, really accomplish anything this year, they don't want to be necessarily avoiding specific teams. I think they just want to beat who's ahead of them. So I don't think that was really something that was discussed internally.
Of the options they have for round 1, Nets, Magic, who do you prefer?
That's tough, Mike, because they play 2 different styles of ball. I think the Magic might be a little bit of an easier matchup for the Sixers in terms of, defensive-wise. The Nets obviously have kind of given them up until the last meeting where the Sixers took care of business, but the Nets obviously have given them fits throughout the year with, the guard play of D'Angelo and Dinwiddie, some of the other guys they have on that roster. So I think the Magic would probably be a little bit more of a preferable matchup for the Sixers, although the Nets might provide them with a little bit more, practical practice, if you will, moving forward in terms of having to guard, a guy like Kyrie maybe or some of these other guards throughout the NBA. The Nets are kind of like could serve as a preview for that. But I think matchup-wise, Orlando would probably be the better choice. Yeah,
neither one of them has a lot of playoff experience players at all. Neither one of them has been in the playoffs for quite some time, so you would think that the Sixers should get by either one, maybe one. I don't have a preference either. I don't know which one gives them more problems. I mean, they looked terrible against Orlando the other night. They have lost to the Nets, although they crushed the Nets recently. They have beaten them. I mean, they beat the Magic 114-106, so it's not like these teams have given them fits. They have had their issues with them. However, I said, Michael, I am resigned to the fact that this team is just either going to flip a switch or they're not. Is that how do you feel about this team entering the playoffs?
Yeah, Mike, it's really tough now, especially because, like you said, they obviously have not been playing their best ball over the past couple of weeks, which has just made it, kind of difficult to get a gauge on them. And that's that's a good way to put it. Like, either this talent is going to come together for what they were, this team was built for the postseason, obviously adding Jimmy, adding Tobias with, both coming up on their free agent summers. Obviously, those were moves that were made to, help the team this postseason. So obviously, this is kind of what the entire season has been building up for. And now, the lack of continuality going into the postseason. The starters still have only played, less than a dozen games together. The starting five, they're still, guys that have been in and out of the lineup. And I think that makes it kind of difficult. I mean, on paper, they still have one of the, probably the most talented starting five in the East. But I think the one thing working in their favor potentially is the fact that since they do have so many few games played together under their belt, I think there's the opportunity that the team continues to, to take another step forward that we haven't seen yet in terms of cohesion and chemistry. If they get into a series, 6-7 games, 5, 6, 7 together in the first round where they're all healthy, they're all playing, and they kind of get into a rhythm, that's something that might benefit them moving forward where they can, kind of not necessarily flip the switch in terms of a team that's, steps up the effort, but in terms of, a different level of chemistry that could help them that we haven't seen yet, strictly because they haven't been on the floor together. So I do think that that's something that could work in their favor.
Now, they have played 10 games together. They are 8-2 in those games. So what do we know about them in those 10 games where they've won 8 that makes you say, I've seen them in these 10, and this is why they should be successful?
I mean, offensively, I think in those 10 games you saw a team that just had weapons, a lot of weapons, and defensively enough talent to, keep the score low enough that they could basically outscore the opposition. I think a lot of those games, obviously Joel was his dominant self. Tobias looked great early on in a lot of those games. He's obviously kind of dropped back in terms of his percentages recently. But they were all just, kind of getting theirs in the flow of the offense in a lot of those games and putting up points at a level that the other teams just couldn't match. And I think, their defense has not been their calling card this season. It's been offense, which is a little bit different than last season. But we saw that they have enough talent defensively that when they're clicking offensively, they could be, really, really difficult to beat in terms of putting up, enough points to keep up with them.
Yeah, I know everybody has complained about the defense. Now, Brett will tell you, look, we're the best defense in the league against a three-point shot. But do you feel, in watching them, you're there, at home almost every single night, that they have the individual defensive talent that if they want to play good defense, that they can? Or are they just a poor defensive team with a poor scheme?
I think it falls somewhere in between there, Mike, because I do think they have some really good individual defenders, starting with Joel, who obviously makes a huge difference on that end. I think Jimmy at times, I don't think he's been all, as advertised as a defender since he's come to the Sixers. I feel like there's times where he looks like he's coasting, but there's also times where he looks like an all-NBA defender. So, I mean, with those two guys alone, they have talent, enough to not be a terrible defensive team. But I do worry that, to a man, when you go 5, 6, 7 deep, that there's too many holes on the defensive end to really overcome when you're getting schemed against, a specific matchup against other teams. It kind of came out last year in that Boston series. I think they're better equipped this year, but there's still deficiencies on that defensive end that could be taken advantage of. And there's not, at this point in the season, the roster is what it is. It's personnel related, specifically when it comes to some of these guards, that have been tearing the team up all season. They don't have an answer for that still. Is it going to be Jimmy? Is it going to be Ben? Combination. I think that's still probably one of the biggest issues and questions facing the team heading into the postseason.
Yesterday on the show, Michael, I had said, if I'm the Sixers, why not Ben Simmons last night just go out there and shoot 5 threes? You know what I mean? Like, hey, these games mean nothing. Just go out there and maybe you can find a little spot, a little rhythm at here. That's about all I would have liked to have seen out of the last 2 games here, is maybe just say, hey, Ben, go out there and have a little fun. Do something different. That didn't happen. However, last night, did you get anything from that game? You said Zaire. Anything else come from that game? Does Zaire work his way into the rotation? Does Korkmaz have a role? He's back now all of a sudden. So anything from last night and tonight that the Sixers can take into Saturday?
It's funny you said that about Ben, Mike, because I literally said the exact same thing last night. I was surprised. I agree that I don't think the starters should have even played last night. I think that they should have taken both nights off. And when he did play, why not use that as an opportunity to test the shot out? Obviously, he didn't do that. But to answer the actual question, my really only takeaway from that game was Zaire. I don't think Furkan is going to work his way back into the rotation at this point in the season. I think this sudden late emergence of Zaire as a possible rotation player in the playoffs is pretty interesting, considering that Brett basically I think it was about a month ago when he was talking to us, kind of ruled out both Zaire and Shake Milton as possibilities for the playoff rotation. Basically saying that he thought it was too late in the season. They didn't have enough, time in the rotation experience under their belt in, real game time situations to kind of crack a playoff rotation. And it seems like he might have kind of, thought twice about that at this point, given how well Zaire is, looked defensively, offensively, attacking the rim. I mean, he's not a guy that I think is going to be a huge difference maker in this first postseason, but he is a guy that maybe has gone from being out of the rotation this playoffs to potentially, giving them 10, 12 minutes off the bench per game and potentially making a couple of good plays for them. So I think for me, that was the biggest takeaway last night and will probably be the main thing that I'll look for tonight as well.
Yeah, I would have, just sat everybody and told the bench guys, you're going to play a game like starter minutes the next 2 nights. Go out there and earn a spot in the rotation.
Exactly, especially, considering the fact that this depth is, one of the biggest questions facing the team. It seems like it would almost be, a perfect situation for these guys to get some extra reps in, like you said, and get, maybe a little bit more comfortable for these last couple of games. Tonight, obviously, I think that will be the plan, but, I don't see why, especially considering the level of effort that the team gave last night, like you alluded to, Mike. Seems like they should have done that the same last night, too.
Yeah. It seemed Simmons just looked frustrated at the world last night, right? I mean, even though he had a pretty good game, he had, 18 points, efficient shooting night, his numbers were good. He just looked like he was just like, get me out of here. I want nothing to do with this game. Harris was terrible last night. He hasn't been very good anytime recently. Butler was kind of, what did he play, 15 minutes last night? So it was almost a waste of all those guys' time and wasted taking minutes from guys that you could have learned more about. That's what I just didn't get. So tonight they're going to play all those guys. And, he has had like this tournament between Ennis and John. Simmons played well last night.
He did. And, maybe that's another thing. It seemed as though, Simmons was pretty much out of the playoff rotation as well. But I think Brett, at this point with 2 games left, he might be, still open to the idea of potentially including some of these guys. I think he just knows that, considering their depth issues, the more guys that he could potentially lean on in certain situations, the better. Similar to what they're doing with the big guy rotation. He hasn't, ruled out any of Boban, Jonah, Amir.
By the way, Monroe played well last night.
He led the team in scoring.
He was excellent. He was efficient. He was very good.
I guess that's another takeaway. I guess maybe if he could give them that in a reserve role behind Joel in 10 or 12 minute spans against a team like the Celtics or the Bucks, maybe that's not the worst pickup.
Yeah, no, I was like, man, he looked like a young Greg Monroe. He actually looked better. He was hitting jumpers. He got himself to the line. He was the president. It's interesting because we know come playoff time, I don't know what other big men, because you're not going to who would you face in the second round? You might get Gasol, I would guess, right? That's Toronto would have Gasol in the second round. You could pile up big men for foul purposes, right?
Yeah, right. If you're talking Toronto,
and if you got Orlando in the first round, Vucevic.
Yeah, Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, Gasol, obviously Ibaka in Toronto. There's, both of those teams have some bigger guys, and the Celtics obviously too. If it ever came down to that, between Horford, Baines, those guys, So if Greg Monroe could be a productive big behind Embiid and for short minutes, that could obviously be very beneficial.
You got Embiid hasn't played for a long time. I thought, on top of the fact that he had a welding mask on last year, that he looked out of shape. Number one, the fact that he hasn't played so frequently this last couple of weeks, does that concern you that you're not going to get the best Embiid come Saturday?
Yeah, Mike, I do think it's a bit of a concern, but if it's, if you're weighing the two things, I do understand them, having him rest and be as close to fully healthy as he can be at this point in the season. And then using that, obviously he was coming off of an injury last year with the face mask. He missed the first couple games of that first round series with the Heat, which is a little different. I think this series, the first round, I think he could use it to kind of work himself back into full game shape. Obviously, this is a series, of the 3 seed versus the 6 seed, the series that the Sixers should be able to take care of business of. And Joel could, obviously he's going to see hefty minutes throughout the games in this series, 36, probably something like that, 35, 36, 37 a game. So I think he'll be able to kind of get back into that playing shape, during that first round series. But I expect to see a motivated, fired up Joel. I think he's kind of been, biding his time. Obviously, he doesn't like sitting out games. I think he, is kind of itching to get back out on the floor. And I think, he's a little bit more mature, and I think he'll be able to kind of channel that into, just dominant play during the postseason.
If Mike Scott's your first guy off the bench, who's your second guy? Who's like the number 2 bench option?
I think that has to be, matchup dependent, Mike, depending on, who's on the other side there. If you're going to go with a big guy, whether that's Boban or Jonah, or, obviously TJ has been a guy that's filled that role in the past, or, one of the wing guys. I really think it depends on the flow of the game. At least to me, from what Brett has told, us recently or watching the games, it doesn't seem like there's a, very specific order that he has, other than, Mike has developed into that 6-man guy that plays a couple different roles. But, probably, Jonah or Boban, depending on the situation, is, my guess. And then you go whoever ends up winning out between, as we were talking about, the Jonathan Simmons, James Ennis dynamic off the bench. Any given day, I think it'll be that, combination of those 3 to 4 guys in some order, depending on matchup and foul situation and whatnot.
And I, like you, don't have the right answer, which means I don't know how Brett Brown has the right. I mean, not that like we know more than him, but if we're sitting here saying, man, I got Mike Scott, and I don't have a whole heck of a lot else, I don't know how he approaches how he's going to use a rotation come Saturday.
Yeah, and there just doesn't really seem to be any consistency of it at this point in the season, which I think is a little concerning. Last year during that winning streak to end the season and going into the postseason, I think the rotation was pretty clear at that point. You had Ersan coming in for Dario, Marco, and TJ would come in, and that would be, the pretty solid rotation. They just don't have that this year. And I think that's why maybe Brett's kind of opening it up to more guys that he might have had kind of penciled out of the rotation a couple weeks ago. I think he sees that now that, we don't have this, solid structure of a rotation. Maybe the more guys that I could throw in there for different situations, the better, which is maybe why we're seeing him kind of double back on Zaire, double back on John Simmons, and maybe give these guys a second look.
We're talking with Michael Kaskey-Blomain. Sixers finish out the season tonight. Is there a scenario where you think Brett Brown could be in trouble? What would that be?
Only if they lose in the first round, Mike. It would have to be, a situation where they're just outplayed by a team that's clearly, inferior, whether that be the Nets or the Magic. I think it's safe to say the Sixers are the more talented team in either of those matchups. If they, obviously lose in the first round, that means they, clearly took a step back and were, bested by an inferior team. I think that's really the only situation where you would go into this offseason with being able to say that Brett's like really on the hot seat. If they get to the second round and again, lose to one of these tougher teams, I think there'll be some whispers, some questions maybe, but not to the point where he would really be feeling the heat. But, the only way I really see that happening is if they flame out in this first round.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot of people that think if they don't get out of the second round, I don't know, unless they get swept and look bad. Maybe. I mean, but even then, I just find it hard to say. I mean, we're having a conversation here, and we can't put a rotation together.
Right, and considering, I think the front office, we've talked about this, on the show throughout the year, kind of, Mike, in terms of the expectations. I think the ownership and front office is understanding of, just the turnover that the team has gone through this season and the impact that turnover has had on Brett's ability to, develop that solid rotation that we're talking about to get the defensive chemistry and cohesion up to a point where he would feel comfortable. The 2 blockbuster trades in the middle of the season made that difficult. And I think that's, certainly impacted Brett's ability to, coach this season. And I think that's understood throughout the organization and definitely taken into account when you, consider how the team does in the playoffs.
If you're looking for something that to kind of change or, bolster this team come playoff time, there's a number, Tobias Harris in L.A. shot over 40% from 3. I think it was like 42 or 43%. He's at like 32%. That's drastically different. Maybe he gets going and gets closer to that 40%, and that could be a big difference. But he has not shot the ball well from beyond here.
Yeah, Mike, and that's probably one of my top concerns with this team heading into the postseason. Tobias was shooting really well when he first came, the first few weeks after the trade, and obviously with the Clippers earlier this season, as you just mentioned, and it's really, almost fallen off a cliff over the past couple of weeks. Last night was really, difficult to watch. He just couldn't buy a basket from anywhere. And I think that's, definitely a concern. If he's able to play like he was when he first got here back in LA and make, 40-some% clips from long distance, that, completely transforms the Sixers offense. But if he can't, if he's not knocking down those shots, as I think we've seen in the recent weeks, that's been not the sole reason certainly, but definitely contributed to their, struggles over some of these games over the past couple of weeks. So that's, for me, definitely something to keep an eye on.
You know whose three hasn't gone away? Shamit, 45%.
Yeah, that makes it slightly tougher. But I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone wouldn't make that move to get Tobias here.
You should check my text board out.
I believe it. I do believe it.
Was Michael Kaskey-Blomain surprised that Magic Johnson stepped down?
I was shocked, Mike, and that took away some of my attention from the Sixers game because you
didn't miss much in the Sixer game. Don't worry.
No, it happened right in the middle of it, and I was very surprised. I mean, I think everyone was. I heard Keith on here, earlier talking about it, and it was. I think everyone in the NBA circles just, didn't see it coming. I expected it to go the other way, where I thought the news today would probably be that they would be looking for a new head coach. That Luke Walton had been relieved of his duties, and instead, not only the fact that he quit, just the way that he did it, the surprise press conference that just went on for seemingly hours and hours, and without telling, Jeannie or anyone else in the Lakers organization. It was just it was something that I won't forget for a long time in terms of the NBA.
I would say bizarre timing. I wasn't surprised that he quit. I mean, he quit after 15 games coaching. He quit broadcasting. He quit just about everything he's done. And look, to me, I think the Lakers are going to be better off for it. And somebody makes people make the joke that, hey, now he can recruit Ben Simmons legally,
Yeah, and he specifically mentioned Ben and the backlash he kind of got from, when the situation came out that Ben wanted to work with him and all that earlier this year. He mentioned that twice last night about, the situations like that contributed to him wanting to walk away from his post.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain will be there tonight, more so for Elton, right? Or what did Magic call him last night? Eldon Campbell.
Yeah. Eldon.
Yeah. If there's a question to ask Elton Brand tonight, what is it?
There's a lot, Mike. I think obviously moving, if you're looking forward, his plans in terms of free agency and his approach for the summer, but more in the short term, I think it would just be interesting to hear how he feels about the moves that he made, and in terms of if he thinks there's anything that he, potentially could have done better to, maybe bolster the bench a little bit for this playoff push.
All that, and I think entering these playoffs, does Brett Brown have to get to a certain level? And me, I'm not a Brown hater at all. I'm just speaking in terms of like what I read from social media and stuff, that these people want this guy out. You know what I mean? It's crazy, but I think that to me might be the biggest storyline is how far does this team and how do they have to perform for him to be safe?
I don't disagree, Mike, but I have a hard time thinking that would be something that Eldon would come out with straightforward. Even if he was asked that, it seems like a perfect question for him to kind of beat around the bush and not give a direct answer. It doesn't seem like he'd be like, oh, if we lose in the second round, he's gone. It just doesn't seem like he would come out and say something like that. Right. But I do agree with you that that's certainly a main storyline to pay attention to.
All right. Follow him on Twitter for tonight's Sixers game, and Elton Brand at 7:15 tonight, the real Mike KB. And, of course, the NBA draft is June 27th. We'll have our NBA draft party. We're having our NFL draft party. For the NBA draft party, we might have to try to get you down here this year.
Yeah, for sure.